So thank you so much to Zach and for all of you for coming out tonight. Science on Screen is really special to me because it combines two of my favorite things, science and movies. So we're very fortunate tonight to have Dr. Steve Howell with us. If you've been to previous Science on Screens, you may have seen him virtually participate, but tonight he is here in person. So he heads up the Space Sciences and Astrobiology Division at NASA Ames Research Center, which is outside San Francisco. And he was the project scientist of both the Kepler and the K2 missions. He received a PhD in astrophysics at the University of Amsterdam, and this is remarkable, has over 900 scientific publications. So he has also written a textbook on digital imaging detectors, and has a passion for sharing astronomy with people and public speaking. So we're fortunate to have him here tonight. And tomorrow, he's actually on his way to Hawaii to do some astronomy. So students in the audience, when you're choosing a science or engineering field, remember that sometimes astronomy happens in Hawaii.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Tracy. Thanks, Zach. Yeah.
Okay, so, sorry, moving toward the stool. So we're going to get started with the conversation of Science on Screen. So one of the things I was thinking about as I watched this movie is if you told me we were going to see a science fiction movie from the 1950s, I would have thought probably of something from Mystery Science Theater 3000, which I grew up watching. And so this movie is so distinct from those kind of films. And I also really like that it's kind of humanist sci-fi, like Arrival and like Contact, which we saw last year, right? Sometimes the aliens don't come to Earth to kill us or take our resources, but maybe come to warn us or to teach us how to be better people. So we'll get started with Steve and talk more about the science aspects of the film. So one of the things is Klaatu has this really cool robot called Gort. And so I had a robotics class a long time ago, but I realized from communicating with him this week that I don't know the difference between a cyborg and an android. So maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit to start out with and talk about robotics within the context of this film and what classification Gort might actually fall under.
All right, sure. So, wow, thanks everybody for being here. And Zach, thanks, man. It's absolutely great. So last year, I think I told Zach this was my favorite film, and so he made it happen for me this year. So thanks, that was so great. So, we talked about desert islands. We had one film. This is it. This is my film. So if you don't know the term robot, this is where robot came from. In 1920, there was a play in Czechoslovakia, and it was Rossum's Universal Robots. And this is where the term robot came from. And do any of you know the Google Ngrams? Do you know the Ngrams things? Yes. Well, if you don't know them, they're really cool. So you can go and type in words or letters or acronyms or whatever in Ngrams, and it'll tell you where these things have been used. So on the top, I typed in automaton, cyborg, and android, and it tells you from 1800 to about the year 2000, Google has digitized every book and everything that's ever been written. And it tells you how many times that word has been used. And if you type in on the bottom, I put robot in, and you can see robot starts in 1920 because of the play we just talked about. And then robot really peaked in 1980. Can anyone imagine why robot peaked in 1980? What's that? Terminator. Yeah, Terminator, right? All the Terminator things. And then it's kind of set. But even now, robot just beats the rest of these things like crazy. So I looked up all these terms. Whoops, let's not go over there. Okay, so here are the terms, the definitions for robot, automaton, android, and cyborg. I'll give you 30 seconds to read them. Come on. Okay, and so how many of you, after you read these, are you done yet? Come on. Okay, what was Gort? Was Gort a robot, which everybody says Gort was a robot? Was Gort a robot, an automaton, an android, or a cyborg? Yeah, I don't know. I can't figure it out from all this definition. Because I always thought he was a robot, too. For all my life, he was like a robot. But he doesn't really fit any of these definitions. And I have to say, it'd really be cool if somebody came and did this now and we were told to quit having wars. Wouldn't that be cool? That'd be so great. So I don't know what he is. But anyway, he's pretty cool in all these things. So How about you, Tracy? What is he?
I'm thinking automaton, maybe. How many of you guys think robot? Robot? Automaton? Audience poll time. Android?
Android. We got some Android. Yeah.
Lots of androids. Okay. Anybody think cyborg? No.
You know, he's really a guy in a neoprene suit, I got to tell you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to blow there.
Very tall guy. Very tall.
Yeah.
So the next thing I kind of want to talk about, I think movies like this that look inward, that have the aliens kind of reaching out to us and talking to us, brings to mind is there's something in astronomy called the Drake equation, which predicts the number of civilizations in our galaxy that would be able to communicate with us based on a number of variables and assumptions. And so the physicist Fermi, in response to this, kind of said, well, you know, if it's statistically this likely that there's a large number or preponderance of civilizations in our galaxy that can communicate, why aren't they? Where is everybody? So I kind of wanted you to talk about that within the context of this film, and also maybe talk about your own work with Kepler and finding potentially habitable planets.
Sure. So how many of you have followed the Kepler mission? Anybody out there? Wow, that's like half hands, man. I feel really disappointed, you know. And the K2 mission? Oh, man. All right. So these are missions that are looking for planets that orbit other stars, right? And we found, 5,000 other planets. I mean, 5,000, that's a lot, right? And we know from that statistics that there's something like 20 million other planets the size of the Earth in our galaxy. 20 million. So you think there's got to be life somewhere else, right? But we don't know, and it'll probably be a while before we know. And so the Drake equation was an equation that was put together a bunch of terms about saying, where would you have a planet that has life? Right? How would you get life? And so you have to have lots of things that go together. You have to have a planet that's relatively small, like the Earth. We think we're a big deal, but we're a tiny little rock. And you have to have planets that have atmospheres and water, and you have to have planets that have a nice star like our sun. And you have to have planets that have evolved for a while so that life isn't just amoebas, it turns out to be things like us. And so you put all these together and you think of how many there should be. And then you believe, if that's true, that these planets should be communicating, right? They should be sending out signals to the rest of the universe. And so we've been looking with projects like SETI for 30 years now, or 40 years. And we have detected 0 other civilizations. 0. So what does that mean? Does that mean there are no other civilizations? Or does that mean we can't detect them? Or does that mean, my favorite, things are really far apart? So how many of you in chemistry learned that atoms consist of mostly empty space? Right, common thing, right? So I put together a little chart. I was teaching a high school class, and all the kids in my high school class said, atoms are a bunch of empty space. And so I put together this little chart where I looked at the empty space in an atom, and that's the top one here. So if you take the size of a nucleus of an atom, and you look at how far it is in nucleus sizes to the first electron, it's 100,000 times as far away of the size of the atom. Wow, that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? So there's 100,000 times of empty space there. And if you do it, let's skip all the rest. If you come down the stars to the nearest star, so our nearest star is the star system Alpha Centauri, it's 1,000,000 times away. Stars are really far apart, and that's our nearest star. And so if you're a civilization like us, do we spend our entire energy budget sending out signals to everybody else in space saying, hey, we're here, hey, we're here, or do we try to do something better with it, like helping humanity? And I would hope that it's the second one and not the first one. And so we have not found anybody, but I don't take that to mean that nobody else is out there. I think this is why we don't hear anybody else. We're really, really far apart. And we don't yet have warp drive. Right? We would love warp drive. We don't have transporters. I would love transporters. I could be to Hawaii tomorrow like that, and that would be so great. Instead, I have a lot of hours in an airplane. So that's what I think.
Yeah. So one of the things we were talking about before the film, so I personally like films where scientists are heroes and where when a character has a problem, they quite literally go and, as in this film, knock on the door of the academy. So I did kind of want to get your perspective on, do you think this film has a hero, and who is that person? I'd said at dinner I thought it was the scientist, but wanted to hear your perspective.
The hero of the film or the hero in general?
Either.
Oh, I think that's great, yeah. So tell us some of your heroes. Come on, who are some of your heroes? Hey, sorry.
Yeah, somebody said Patty Griffin,
Cool.
a singer. Steve, will you stand in the light, please? It makes a difference. Oh, okay.
It's bright
now I can
up
relax.
here. I need my sunglasses.
Who are your scientific heroes? Is that your question?
Yeah, or any hero, I don't know.
Arthur C. Clarke.
Oh, very nice. Who else? Stephen Hawking. Yeah. Carl Sagan.
Sally Ride?
Charles Darwin. Wow, that's a great one. Yeah.
All those women and hidden figures and all the women we don't know about yet.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
So
Okay.
who's the hero of this film?
Yeah, who's the hero in this film? Bobby's my second choice. Yeah, Patricia Neal. Yeah, that's who I picked as a hero, right? She's the person that really has a lot of heart and soul, right? And really has humanity as her thing. Wow, that's really great.
Oh, we had another poll that we were going to do.
Cool.
Right? Where is he from? Where is Klaatu from? 'Cause
Oh,
he
Lots of
says,
distance. Yeah.
yeah, what's the distance? 250 million miles away?
yeah. Yeah, so where's Klaatu from?
Any guesses? 250 million miles.
Come on, there's only a couple choices. I mean, the solar system's big, but there's only a couple choices. The Milky Way. The Milky Way, that's a good choice. Pretty far away. The moon, pretty close. 250,000 miles. Oh, Pluto, my favorite planet, but no. So at this time, in 1951, Mars was the planet that everybody thought might have life, right? Even today, we are just so enamored with life on Mars, which I think is really cool. But Mars was not where Klaatu could have been from. With that number, there's only one planet in our solar system he could have been from. It was Venus. Amazingly, Venus, right? How many of you have seen Queen of the Universe with Zsa Zsa Gabor? She Rules Venus. Oh, man, great film. Nothing like this, but great film. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, have you seen that one? Oh, yeah, okay. That's good. So, yeah, so Venus, so pretty interesting. So, one of the perspectives from the Kepler mission is we find planets, and we only find them by their size. So we know nothing about the planet. We don't know the planet's mass. We don't know if the planet has an atmosphere. We don't know if the planet could even have life. We find it by its size. So if I was a spacecraft far away from our solar system and I stared at our solar system, I would find two planets in our solar system that would be roughly the same size, and both of them would be in what we call the Goldilocks zone, or the habitable zone. It would be Venus and Earth. And we know, because we live here, that Venus is nothing like the Earth. We could never live on Venus. We could have never developed on Venus, but yet we did on Earth. And so we have to be very, very careful in just finding the size of a planet and thinking that means that that planet has life. At the same time, we also want to be very hopeful that we're not the only life. I want to be very hopeful, I should say, that we're not the only life in here. 20 million other planets our size in our galaxy alone. I'm feeling pretty positive.
Yeah. So the last question before we open it up to audience Q&A, which is always the most fun part of this, is thinking about the film within the context of other movies that show, aliens finding humans. How do you think that this film and the way it portrays how an alien film might view us is different from other films in this vein?
Yeah, that's such a good one, right? So how many of you have seen Alien? right? Yeah. You don't want to ever meet that person, right? I mean, that alien, right? That's just mean. So here I think we have a person, an alien, I don't know what to call them, right? That is very much like us, right? And you can't tell them from us, right? They look like a human. And that's probably not how other life would be, but we don't really know. But, I think I put together some slide about how they show up, which I can believe is real. They show up. People are afraid of them. They bring out the military. I mean, this great line in here, the military have been put in charge. Oh my God, what are we doing, right? The military's been put in charge. And they shoot the guy, right? They shoot him again and again. I mean, it's just one of these things based on fear, right, where we would do this. And maybe they're nice, right? Every movie we see has them being mean. Well, not every, but most of them, right, has them being mean. And here's a person who just wants to show up. However, I would like to say in this movie, so why does he get off the spacecraft with his helmet on? He clearly doesn't need it, right? And if he got off with his helmet off, he'd look like a person, right? And why does he reach into his thing and pull out this weird thing, right? So, he kind of sets himself up a little bit for this. Not that he should be shot, don't get me wrong, but why does he come out with his helmet on? He doesn't need his helmet, right? Anyway, so it's pretty funny. But I don't know, I'd get a bad rap. I wouldn't want to visit the Earth.
Okay, with that, we can take audience Q&A. So questions about the film or about NASA.
Oh. Nice. Can I show the robot slide?
Yes.
Kind of more of a question about
Sure.
the film itself. This was done in 1951. Do you think the moments of irony, like, oh, their life expectancy is so much longer as they light the cigarettes, do you think those were intentional or it just happened to be that way?
I'm sorry, I missed the moments of irony.
Oh, well, like in the hospital, they're like, oh, their life expectancy is so much longer. I wonder why, as they light like cigarettes and just stuff like
yeah,
that.
wasn't that great?
Yeah.
That's so great. Yeah. Well, Tracy, you want to say something about that?
I don't know that that's intentional. I can't really speculate on that.
It's always hard with films from this period to
Yeah.
tell what's intentional and what's just now in retrospect.
It is interesting that this film is kind of really the start of the Cold War. It's really pre-space race.
Thank you.
So it's interesting to view it from that perspective as well. We were talking about that as before the film, kind of the start of that escalation and viewing the film in that historical context.
It was so great to smoke then, right? If you watch any film of the 50s, everybody smoked. Right? It's what they did, right? Hey, how are you? Hey, you want a cigarette? I mean, it was what they did, right? And I thought here, the things of irony, I don't know if they were great. There was a lot of cool irony in here. So how many of you have been to Washington, D.C.? How many of you have seen the scenes where this movie was filmed? I mean, they all exist today. It's just absolutely amazing, right? They're still there. It was a movie that showed very little of things that weren't on the Earth, right? And I think that was one of its greatest skills. I mean, Zach pointed this out as well, right? One of the greatest skills because you didn't want to make up lots of stuff you couldn't really do well. And so it was kind of a person hanging out on the Earth, and all the scenes were pretty much just on the Earth and the fear and stuff. So it was really great for that. So,
All right, we got a question right here.
What's your thoughts on the wow signal?
on the what?
The wow signal?
The wow signal. Well, wow. So, yeah. So, phew. People have been looking for life for a long time. It's an admirable pursuit. And I think that as an experiment, as a scientist, we should never stop experimenting. Because the way you learn something is you experiment and try to find an answer. The wow signal, I think, was one of many times throughout scientific history where we thought we had discovered something that was, we being the general science community, not me personally. I've been around for a while, but I haven't been everywhere. We thought we found something very exciting. And unfortunately, I think in all cases so far, we've been wrong as a case of anything extraterrestrial. I mean, another example which happened long ago, before a third of you were alive, was when pulsars were discovered. And there's a very famous story, which probably will come out in a movie someday, but hasn't yet, where people were observing with radio telescopes and found a signal that was incredibly repetitive. And at the time, the way you recorded signals was on a piece of paper with a little needle that moved around and made a graph. And it was actually written that this was a signal from little green men. And it was LGM was written on there. And it turned out that it was the discovery of a pulsar, a rapidly rotating neutron star. And so this has happened before, and my guess is it will happen again. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't quit looking, because maybe someday we'll find the real signal. Or maybe somebody will find us and come visit us. That'd be great. So.
All right.
I'd like to know what you think of black holes.
That's a really dark subject. Oh, come on, work with me on this, come on. Well, I think they exist, if that's what you're asking. There's none near us, which is unfortunate because we could really put them to use, like garbage disposal, tunnels to other places in the universe. But black holes clearly exist. I think we have absolute proof that they do. They come in sort of two sizes. There are what are called stellar black holes, things that are 10 or 20 or 30 times the mass of our sun, that have collapsed and have absolutely no light coming from them per se. And there are galactic black holes, which are things that are millions and millions of times the mass of our sun, that exist almost exclusively at the centers of galaxies. Our galaxy has one, for example. The center of the Milky Way has a black hole. And right now, fortunate or not, our black hole is not deciding to be very active. It's kind of quiescent. And so if you looked at our galaxy from far away, you might not know it had a black hole. If you look at other galaxies right now that have very active black holes, they have a very clever name in astronomy called an active galaxy. We're very great at naming things. And so an active galaxy is a black hole that's eating away the material of that galaxy. The stars and the inner parts of that galaxy are being literally gravitationally sucked into that black hole. So I don't know if I answered your question what I think of them. They're pretty cool. I'd like to have one close to us, but we don't. Yeah.
All right, we got one right here.
So
We'll
I
get
know
to
you
you.
said that
He doesn't see you.
that part of the reason we haven't discovered anybody else around in our neighborhood is the distance. But do you also think that it's possible that advanced societies always destroy themselves, and given the distance between and the time that it would take to communicate, that also contributes to us not finding anything?
So that's one possible explanation for the
You know, I think
Fermi-
Tracy's an expert on this subject.
No, I'm not. So that's one possible explanation for the Fermi paradox, though. But
Yeah.
So you can weigh in on that.
Maybe
That
they're just
is
avoiding
indeed one
us.
of the answers of the Fermi paradox. Yeah. People get each other.
All right, we got one right up
There's a
here.
guy right here. Yeah.
Well, that's the perfect follow-up for me because I'm a biologist. I have to teach my students the mass extinctions, and I point out to them that humans have or will exhaust their coal resources in less than 3,000 years. It took 300,000 years to lay them down. It seems to me that our species is exhausting its resources so rapidly that the time between the spark of a technological civilization that could send out signals that we'd perceive and the exhaustion of our planetary resources means that electric signal is just a little thin balloon as it expands out from our planet between the birth of civilization and the death. It'd be really hard to be at the right place to catch that signal, wouldn't it?
That's a sobering thought. Yeah. You know, it reminds me when you talk about, you mentioned coal, that in the 1920s and 30s, it was believed that our sun was burning coal. Right? No one knew about nuclear fusion. And the best guess for the sun was that it was this giant lump of burning coal. And therefore, we were pretty young because it would burn out in 20,000 years. No matter how massive it was, right? It would all burn out in 20,000 years. And so I think your point about losing energy very quickly is well taken. Yeah.
All right, we've got one right here.
Hi, thanks for your presentation.
Oh, thanks for coming.
I've seen this movie a few times. I love it. There's something about it that I really love. But what stuck out to me was the very end, where Klaatu is talking about his civilization. And instead of, or at least what's implied, their civilization just coming to some sort of enlightenment, it's almost implied that Gort and similar sort of robots are what keep their violent tendencies in check. So as technologically and socially advanced as they are, it's some sort of strong-arm technique that keeps them placid. I was just wondering, what were your general thoughts about that? It doesn't seem to be like some key knowledge. It seems to be power that keeps them in check.
Tracy?
So, wow, that's a big question.
I throw all the hard questions over there.
Yeah, you're throwing the hardball snot. So I think that brings to mind something we didn't talk about, which is dual use technologies, right? So we develop a lot of technologies that can be used for peaceful purposes, but then also can be co-opted for destructive purposes. And so there's a question of, how you control proliferation of those technologies and ensure that they're used for good things and not for evil. And so I think the film brings up, this kind of alien police force that's keeping that in check, kind of this galaxy police that's coming to planets and saying, hey, don't develop these bad things because you really can't handle rockets. He brings that up in the film. He says, we don't care about your aircraft and your kind of pedestrian things, but now that you have rockets, we're coming to warn you about that. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think your comment's well taken. I think it plays on the human condition, right? So is that what we're going to do? And I think this movie is very pertinent to today's life as well. It's, as Zach said, it's 67 years old, but I think the message is just as appropriate today as it was 67 years ago. When are we ever going to just kind of, quit doing bad stuff and do good stuff?
Okay. Question back here.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to leapfrog that guy with how Gort's used as like the pinnacle of their civilization. Is that really what is? Should robots be used like that for humans, or should we keep making sex bots and drones and like what's the goal with like are we making WALL-E as a cleanup crew?
All right, WALL-E was a great movie. Sex bots, I'm throwing to you.
I'm pitching that question right back.
Okay, but Gort was pretty freaking cool. Right? Gort was cool. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if that's, okay, so if we could have Gorts and our civilization supported art, music, and science and not war, I would vote 1,000% for that. I mean, So, thank you for that vague applause.
Oh, okay. There's one over here.
So, Bill, what
is anybody going to ask about the theremin?
Oh, yeah. Bernard Herrmann's score, theremin. I forgot to
How many of you
mention that
play
earlier.
the theremin?
Man, so good.
I've never had anybody say yes to that. I'm so disappointed. Yeah.
There's somebody here.
We've got one right back here.
You play the theremin back there? All right. Oh, cool. They are the coolest thing. Right? And do you play this soundtrack all day long?
So, Bill Watterson said that the surest sign that intelligent life exists in the universe is that it has not tried to contact us. But if you were aliens, what would be the first thing that you would identify when you landed on Earth? So this guy forms relationships with people in Stranger in a Strange Land. Robert has his Martian delve into religion when he first comes in. So my question is, what would you first identify with in humanity if you were to come as aliens? Both of you. Thanks.
Wow.
So I would say, and I do like your comment about how this is kind of a fish out of water story, like Stranger in a Strange Land, and thought of it in that context. I think probably the first thing that I would gravitate toward would be film. I really love film. I feel like some of our best selves are reflected in film. So it's probably a good place to provide that answer to.
I'd be scared to come to the Earth. You know, I mean, especially if I'm monitoring radio and TV broadcasts, you know, wow, I'd be scared to come here. I think I'd land in some small island in the South Pacific. I think that'd be my place because everybody's kind of cool out there, and I would just hang out on the beach. It'd be neat. Yeah.
Another question over here.
Okay, I'm looking at Gort. Does he kind of look like an Academy Award or something? Just curious.
Thanks for the comment. So these are the robot movies that came out in the 1950s. And I have to say that there aren't a big competition for the coolest robot, right? I mean, Robbie's pretty cool, right? We all love Robbie, right? Robbie's great. Have you guys seen Robbie's in the Smithsonian? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, Robbie's pretty cool. The rest of them are like freaking boxes and stuff. And look at this, the Roman up here. He's got like a helmet on and a gorilla suit. I mean, he's really pretty awful. So, you know, the Gort, and the reason I put Gnut in there, if you've read the original story, that was the robot's name in the original story, was Gnut. Anyway, so he was a pretty cool robot. They spent a lot of money on this movie to make the spaceship have no cracks and no seams and things like that.
I have one more question.
Sure.
I see you start with 1940. What is the earliest movie that has a robot in it?
Oh, wow. Well, it's, you know, Metropolis has a robot, right? I mean, we're getting into whether the robots are automatrons and all that kind of stuff, but Metropolis, of course, is very famous for having a robot, and it's a female, right? So there's a lot of good things.
What year would that? Is that a movie? A year?
Zach, do you know Metropolis?
Ah, man.
27?
27?
Yeah.
1927.
I've got one, 1918.
What was that? The Mechanical Man.
It was The Master Mystery by Harry Houdini.
Okay, yes.
Cue the automaton.
Yeah, there was The Mechanical Man. I mean, there were you know, people thought about this for a long time, and I think that that's a human condition as well, right? That we want to be able to have things that do our bidding for us, our tasks that we don't want to do. I think it comes back to the question of, you know, what are we as humans? Would we have a robot that would control our society? Yeah, I know. The Jetsons, for example, right? Man, the Jetsons were cool, right?
So just another couple,
Right.
real quick. Yeah.
Hello. What fascinates me about movies of this era especially is that computers as we know them today didn't exist back then. This particular movie is 1951. That's 1 year after Turing published his Can Machines Think paper. It looks like these filmmakers were already asking that question in some form. And even the technology that they present in this movie, like wave-activated lights and stuff, it's fairly consistent with what we see in the modern world. So how much do you think technology today is sort of inspired by what goes in the movies and vice versa?
So I think
all the hard questions.
I think, yeah, that's okay. I think there's a symbiotic relationship there, right, between film and literature inspiring science and vice versa.
So how many of you have noticed that Tobor the Great is robot spelled backwards? Yeah. So I say that just to agree with Tracy that, you know, I think it's a symbiotic relationship that we both, you know, they push technology. Dick Tracy had the little wristwatch that talks, right? And now we have wristwatches that talk. Well, some of you do. And so I think there's, you know, things we can think about in the future, and some of them happen. At the same time, I think there's a lot of things that people have thought about that to happen in the future, and they haven't happened, and we've kind of forgot about them. So let me ask a question. How many of you, this was your first time seeing this movie? Okay, that's fabulous. I'm ashamed of you people. Okay, how many of you would see it again? How many of you thought this was really a cool movie? Well, yeah, I would see it again too. How many of you first-timers would see this movie again? And how many of you thought it was still relevant today? Yeah, that's great. All right, recommend it to your friends.
All right, last poll while we're doing this, and then we'll wrap up. Are we getting into the planetary society or whatever, the interstellar? Are we getting into it right now? Okay.
What are you doing, man? You're crazy now. What are you doing?
I don't know. Well, thank you all so much for being here, and we encourage you to stick around and have conversations with our wonderful speakers here. There's some NASA stuff in the lobby. Pick that up, and just keep thinking about science and film. And please If you've got recommendations for stuff in the future, hit us up. But yeah, thank you so much to Dr. Steve B. Howell and Tracy Prater. And thank you all for making Science on Screen 2018 such a great experience. Have a good evening.